Hey, what's up you guys, The Curious Owl here, and today I have my September wrap-up. So considering the fact that I did not complete really many, if any at all, prompts for like Aurelium or anything, I still had a pretty successful month. I did complete either books that I started the month prior and finished, or like started and finished within the same month. 15 books, so not bad, but I wish I would have had more time to do my Aurelium TBR because I only got through 2 books in my Aurelium TBR specifically, and so I feel kind of bad about that because a lot of those books have to carry over into the next few months, but it's fine. At least I have more time to do that than I thought. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started with my stats for the month. In terms of pages, I read about 3,528 pages. Minutes-wise, I ended up reading a total of 13 hours, 4 minutes, and 2 seconds worth of audiobooks. 10 of the books I read were from my physical library, 3 were ebooks, and 2 were audiobooks. 7 of the books I read were from my own personal library, or that I at least owned, and the rest of them were borrowed. When it comes to the star ratings, I had 5 5 stars, 6 4 stars, 3 2 stars, or 3 3 stars, 1 2 star, and I did have a DNF, which I did not count in my completed books or ratings or anything. I just did have a DNF, so that was not necessarily very fun. I'll go ahead and quickly talk about the DNF that I had this month because it's only the one and I just don't really want to like talk about it for too long, and that was A Girl Like That by Tanaz Bhathena. I just really didn't like the writing style of this. I thought it was not really conducive to the type of story that I think was trying to be told, and I just found it to be really aggravating in some ways, so I just didn't really enjoy this book, did not want to continue with it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the other books that I read this month. So the first one was I finished up Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. Loved this so much. I, for some reason, went into the series being a little bit more hesitant than normal. I think because I'm so used to the fantasy stuff and with like a little bit of sci-fi that I was not really ready for an aviator sci-fi kind of story, but I love this so much. I love Spensa as a character. I love the world that this is set up in. I loved Mbot so much. Like, Mbot has my heart and soul, and I just really, really enjoyed this one. The next book I completed was a 2024 anticipated release for me, which was Where Sleeping Girls Lie by Ferida Abike Iyamide. This is Ferida's second book that they have come out with, and I also gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this. It dragged a little bit toward the middle of stuff, but I still love this from beginning to end, and I am actually going to be rereading this in October because of the fact that this is going to be hitting a couple things for my TBR in October. So I'll be reading this twice in 2 months. Next, I had my final Witcher book that I finished up before the live show that we did in September, which was Season of Storms. Gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I liked the way overall that the story kind of ended in terms of like it being a prequel, but I do think that this was something that I needed to read before starting the series. I made that realization as I was reading that it probably would have made more sense for me to read this before anything else in the series. Then I ended up reading Pestilence by Laura Thalassa, which was an unread book project book for me, and I was floored with how much I loved this one. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I was not expecting to love this as much as I did, and I don't know really why. I mean, I just thought that it was just going to be something I was going to be kind of like either a 3 or a 4 star for the longest time. But now I want to read more of Laura's work, and I especially want to read the rest of the Four Horsemen series. Then I ended up reading and finishing Come and Get It by Kiley Reid. This I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked what was kind of going on within this, but I kind of feel like it was one of those stories where there was a certain point where I was like, what is the point of this? I just felt like there were some things that I could have done without, and I just, not necessarily my favorite, but I did enjoy it for what it was worth, and so that's why I kind of give it a 4 star as opposed to giving it a 3 star, because it was enjoyable. I did, you know, find myself continuing the story even if I didn't understand the point of it, but maybe it's just because it's not a book for me to get. That's entirely possible. Next, I completed the audiobook of Thunderland by Brandon Massey. This is my least favorite of Brandon Massey's books, to be completely honest, and this is, I believe, his debut novel. I just didn't like most of the story. I didn't really connect with the characters. I didn't really feel like I was getting much out of it compared to the rest of the books that he's written. This one did kind of fall more in the kind of fantastical fantasy things as opposed to it being more of a mystery kind of thing. It did feel very much like a Stephen King novel, I will say. I think that this very much was inspired by kind of the feel of Stephen King novels, and I mean it really showed in this one, whereas the rest of Brandon Massey's work does not really feel like that to me. This one though really did, and it just was not my favorite. I thought it was kind of just long-winded and not really necessary, and I just gave it a 3-star. Then I ended up reading Censored by Junji Ito. This is a short manga book that focuses on a world where essentially there is this woman who goes to this place where her hair is like this important thing, and the strands of her hair basically give people psychic powers and all these different things. It's a very, very weird story. I don't really feel like I fully understood the grasp of it, and this is probably my least favorite Junji Ito book I have read thus far, and I really like Junji Ito's work. I've really come to love the manga that he's written and created, but this one did not hit for me. I don't feel like I really got a whole understanding and grasp of the story, and it just felt weird, which is odd to say because Junji Ito is known for being, you know, weird horror things, but this was like weird. This was like, I don't understand how this has been created kind of weird. So it was fine though. Like, I read through the whole thing in one sitting and I did enjoy it for the most part. I just, again, felt like I didn't quite get the grasp of it, so I gave it a 3-star. Then I ended up reading Rise of the Jumbies by Tracy Baptiste. This is the second book in the Jumbies trilogy, which is a middle grade series that is dedicated to basically telling the story of this girl who is basically what's called half Jumbi, which means she's basically like half of a supernatural creature, having a mom that was a Jumbi, or basically a mythical creature that is well known in circles of like Haiti and the Caribbean and things like that. And this one in particular piggybacks off of the first book, where we basically know that the big bad that was in the first book is no longer here, but there do seem to be a lot of children mysteriously going missing, and so our main character Corinne and her friends have to figure out what to do in terms of getting those kids back and figuring out who is really the one that is causing this to happen. I felt like, again, this one I just didn't connect with the characters as much as I wanted to. I felt like I kind of felt the same with how the Jumbies was. It just wasn't necessarily, I think, something that was wrong with the content of it. I just did not get as involved with it as I wanted to, and so I didn't enjoy it as much, but it was still really good. I did like overall the way that the ending was, though, specifically. I think that was the real standout point of this novel in particular, was the way that the ending was. It was very fun, it was very fast-paced, it was very satisfying in a lot of ways as well. So overall, I did enjoy it for the most part. It just didn't gather my attention like many other middle grade stories typically would, so I gave this one a 3-star as well. Next, I have my next 5-star that I had in the month, which was Golden Girl by Elin Hilderbrand. Many of you may know I have enjoyed Elin Hilderbrand's works previously. I've really enjoyed a lot of the kind of, not necessarily rom-com, but definitely more on the chick lit side of like literary fiction sorts, and this is so far my favorite book of Elin Hilderbrand. This follows a woman who is an author who dies in a hit-and-run accident in the very beginning of the book, and we see her basically in the afterlife working with this character named Martha. And Martha tells her that she has until the end of this coming summer to basically see how things play out in terms of her funeral, how her kids are, because all 3 of her kids are grown adults now, and how she gets to see kind of how they fare without her, as well as other people within the town of Nantucket that she is a part of. And she does also get the ability to do 3 nudges, which basically are ways of her influencing in certain ways things to happen or things to avoid happening, specifically with her kids. And this, I thought, was just a really beautiful way of thinking about what it could be like on the other side for most of us, especially when we know of someone that passes on and what they could be doing and how they can still influence us after their passing. This was really comforting, I think, to understand that this is a possibility of what could be happening on the other side. And again, that idea of the influence from beyond the grave, because we all still have a piece of them in our hearts, and so we always you know, especially those that we were really close with and hold close to our hearts past death, you know, there's this thing to be said about how they can still influence us in our decisions and what we do past their time. And it's just really well done. And honestly, I think that even though I didn't cry necessarily in this, I definitely could have if I was in a really more emotional state, like my grief was still really fresh kind of thing. Next, I ended up picking up another book for my unread book project, which ended up being The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the first book in the Daevabad trilogy, and I loved this. This hit everything I was looking for with the Egyptian feels, with the, you know, desert fantasy, with about the devas and the jinn, and oh my gosh, like I just loved the way the story was constructed. I loved how endless it seemed in terms of the things going on in it, and I really just loved this kind of reluctant allies to lovers kind of thing that was going on. Oh, I just loved this book so much, and I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. Then I did read and complete The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth. This I gave a 4 out of 5 stars to, and this basically deals with a set of twins, Fern and Rose, where Rose is basically trying to get pregnant, but she's not able to. She develops diabetes as a child, and so like as an adult, it makes it hard for her to conceive. Her sister Fern is kind of somewhere on the spectrum, I think. I don't think they ever explicitly state that she has autism or anything like Asperger's or anything, but she is extremely overly sensitive to a lot of different things, which are very consistent with people that have things like autism spectrum disorder or Asperger's, and so it's very likely she has something like that. It's just never clearly stated one way or the other. But basically what happens is Fern decides that she's going to essentially become a surrogate for her sister. But you learn very quickly that there are some dark secrets between these two women and within these two women's lives. And I'm just gonna say, by the end of this, I did not expect it to go the way that it did. And I'm not mad at it. I'm not necessarily like opposed to how this story ended. It kind of threw me for a loop. It made me think about the fact that I may need to reread this and see if I can find little things here and there that kind of hint at what the overall ending would be, because some things I'm just like, oh, so that's what happened. That's a little more terrifying than what I initially thought, which was already pretty terrifying. I think that I just kind of didn't get into it as quickly as I wanted to, but then when I got really into it, I got really into it. So definitely was something I enjoyed, and I will be checking out more of Sally Hepworth's books because this was my very first one of hers. Then I ended up reading the behemoth that is The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. This is the first book in the Jasmine Throne series. This one I really enjoyed. I think that it was really good, and I personally thought there was a lot of fluff in it. I know a lot of people thought that when it came to the story they wanted more out of it, but for me, I felt like I kind of got lost in a lot of the content that was involved in this, so I kind of would have wished it to be maybe a little bit smaller and a little bit less dense. But this is essentially a story where you have a lot of main characters within the whole thing, but the two main ones are Malini and Priya. Malini is this princess whose brother sends her away because she kind of is doing a lot of heretic things, like she's not really conforming to what her brother wants, who is the current crown prince of this kingdom. And then you have Priya, who is basically hired to be her handmaiden, and the two of them kind of build this relationship, and that essentially plays into a lot of the magic involved in the world and the political things that are going on in the world, because Priya has a kind of sordid past that cannot really be brought up, but there are certain things that kind of start to pile up as time goes on, especially the closer she gets to Malini, and it's really important that she kind of keeps that stuff from happening. But as we all know with most books, what ends up being buried from the past has a way of coming back and biting you in the ass sometimes, and you cannot stop it. And so that's kind of a lot of what is going on within this, but I really liked it. I, again, thought it was very well done. It was very dense, I think, a lot of times, and I just didn't quite get as much enjoyment out of it as I wanted to because of that, but I still gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I am super excited to read more of this series and more from Tasha. Then I have my most disappointing read of the month, which was The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I gave this book a 2-star. I was so excited for this, especially because my mom and my sister wanted to read this together, and I couldn't tell you a thing of really what happened. I'm surprised I even finished this book because I was so bored throughout the entirety of it. I did not really enjoy this much at all. This is probably one of my most disappointing books of the entire year, which is awful because this was an anticipated release for this year. I've really enjoyed the Ninth House series by Lee and the Shadow and Bone series, and this just wasn't it. Like, I'm seriously debating whether or not to hold on to this because I want to collect Leigh Bardugo's work, but I don't like this book. So I'm debating on basically getting rid of it because I don't want it on my shelves, but I do want a full collection of Leigh Bardugo's work. Next, I had my audiobook that I was working on for most of this month, which was Within the Shadows by Brandon Massey. I did enjoy this one a lot more than Thunderland. This one was more of a 4 out of 5 stars for me. This one follows a man who basically wants to get into a relationship that he can essentially settle down and have a family and all these things. And he's got this one friend, like his best friend, that he kind of has a thing for, but they kind of dance around each other. They don't really know whether or not to start a relationship or not. And eventually, though, he does meet this other woman named Mika, who he strikes up a very insta-lusty relationship with. But it's very clear that she has other intentions with this relationship than just kind of maybe a one-night stand or, you know, something more tame kind of thing, because the main character doesn't really know whether he wants to be in a relationship with Mika, but when she meets him, she is all in and she is obsessive. She is like super like nails deep into this man, and I felt so uncomfortable most of the time reading this because of that. But the ending was really interesting. It actually kind of threw me for a loop, which is pretty typical of Brandon Massey's work, is that there's kind of a wrench thrown in everything that just screws everything up and you're like, what's going on? How did this happen? Why is this happening? But it's cool at the same time. So it was really well done. It wasn't my favorite kind of way to go about telling the story, but I did like the way that it kind of had developed and what were the, you know, the reasonings behind some of the things that were happening kind of thing. So it was fine. I really did like it, but it's definitely not my favorite Brandon Massey necessarily. So I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. And then the final book that I completed this month was Evocation by S.T. Gibson. Another more disappointing read for me this year, I think, because this was another 2024 anticipated release, and I was expecting to love it just as much as I did A Dowry of Blood, but that was not the case. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. It was fine. I loved the witchy vibes that were involved in this. I loved the magic. I loved the rituals that were involved in this. But I kind of was like, what's the point of this story? Like, even the main point of the story that you find out about 3/4 of the way through the book, I didn't really get. And so I think this is one I will have to reread eventually, just for the sake of understanding what the actual story was even about, because I really don't think I could tell you very much other than the relationships between the characters, because there are some things between the 3 main characters of the story that could be, you know, talked about. So without further ado, those are all the books I ended up reading in the month of September. Again, a pretty decent stack, but just definitely not necessarily as many as I probably wanted to, but I'm happy I got through 15, to be completely honest. Like, that is nothing to sniff at. That is nothing to be ashamed about. I am so happy that I was even able to read on a regular basis in the course of the month. So I will take it. I will take it, and I will be happy with it. So let me know what you guys ended up reading in the month of September, if you did read anything. If you didn't know, I do have an Etsy store where I sell candles and wax melts and various other witchy apothecary goodies. So definitely go check it out down in the description below. I also do have a Patreon where you can access other kinds of content from me, as well as get a discount code for my Etsy store, depending on which tier you're in. And basically that gives you more access to me and more access to what I have going on in my daily life. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be, go ahead and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.